It's 2 in the afternoon on Monday, October 20th. Here in Korea, live from Seoul, I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. The stories we are following at this hour. IT officials and mobile experts from nearly 200 countries gather in Korea's largest port city of Busan to discuss how they can collaborate more closely. Tensions escalate as South and North Korea engage in a shootout near their shared border over the weekend. Pyongyang still does not answer Seoul's call to hold high-level talks. And with the death toll from the Ebola epidemic still on the rise, Korean officials fine-tune the details for sending medical troops to lend a helping hand. And we begin in Busan, where the highest decision-making body for communications technologies, the ITU Plenipotentiary, began its biggest conference on this Monday. ARIRANG's Song Ji-sun, who's at the site covering the meeting, says this year's conference aims to narrow the information gap and digital divide through the sharing of experiences.
Connect 2020 is the vision for the ITU heading into this year's conference. It's a vision that highlights the role of information and communication technologies as a key enabler for social, economic, and environmentally sustainable growth and development. The ITU is UN's oldest international organization and started out setting standards for telegraph services. Today, it embraces issues ranging from cybersecurity and climate change to expanding internet access for the less privileged.
ICTs are, in short, among the keys to achieving sustainable development. As we shape a new development agenda and strive for a new agreement on climate change, let us continue to work together to harness the power of technology to create an accessible and sustainable future for all.
As the host of this year's Plenipotentiary and one of the world's leading ICT countries, Korea hopes to contribute to helping other countries achieve sustainable growth by sharing its experience.
We wish to come up with solutions at an ITU level that include everyone, especially by improving infrastructure in developing countries. Above all, it is crucial to share our ICT policy experience for shared growth and mutual understanding.
To that end, this year's Plenipotentiary will serve as an open venue to build ties outside scheduled events like plenary sessions and elections for council member countries. From this Monday, bilateral and multilateral talks seeking cooperation in the ICT sector will be held throughout the three-week conference between some 3,000 delegates from the 193 member countries. Song Ji-sun, ARIRANG News, Busan.
In other news, North Korea is still not answering South Korea's proposal for high-level talks at the end of this month. Instead, the two Koreas engaged in yet another cross-border shootout over the weekend, and watchers say this could all be a carefully calculated move by Pyongyang. Hwang Sung-hee has the details.
Another shootout across the inter-Korean border has further heightened military tensions on the Korean peninsula. On Sunday, the two Koreas traded fire after 10 North Korean soldiers were seen approaching the military demarcation line near the border city of Paju. This comes just 9 days after North Korea fired machine guns at South Korean balloons carrying anti-Pyongyang leaflets.
Provocations could be aimed at banning the controversial leaflets or at getting South Korea to be less forceful on the North Korean human rights issue at the United Nations on October 28th.
North Korea has yet to respond to South Korea's proposal to hold a second round of high-level talks next Thursday. Experts say the North may be attempting to set the agenda for the planned meeting through the series of shootouts.
North Korea seems to be escalating military tensions to protest South Korea's recent countermeasures and to build up a pretext for discussions on the rules of engagement in the West Sea and the DMZ.
North Korea is expected to seek discussions on preventing future clashes at the maritime border, ending cross-border slandering, and lifting South Korean sanctions. A key issue for South Korea will be holding reunions for war-separated families. as the two Koreas remain largely divided on what they hope to bring to the negotiating table, making progress in just one round of talks could be a challenge. Hwang Sang-hee, ARIRANG News.
We are seeing some positive developments in the global fight against Ebola in Europe and the U.S., but the threat is still very much present, and to help with the efforts, Korean government officials are discussing how and when to dispatch a medical team to two of the hardest hit countries in West Africa. Shin Se-min reports.
A meeting of foreign ministry and related government agencies is well underway this Monday to discuss how Korea is going to support global efforts to tackle Ebola. This follows President Park Geun-hye's decision last week to send a medical support team to Sierra Leone and Liberia. An official says the timing of the dispatch and number of workers to be sent will be discussed. Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf is calling on the international community to help her country in the fight against the disease. She says efforts require a commitment from every nation that has the capacity to help, stressing that Ebola respects no borders. The worldwide death toll has surpassed 4,500, but there have been some positive developments. A Spanish nurse who was the first person to contract Ebola outside of West Africa has now tested negative for the virus. The nurse was known to have contracted Ebola while treating the two infected patients in Madrid. Welcome news in the U.S. as well, as nearly 50 people who had contact with the first Ebola patient in Dallas have almost completed a 3-week watch period with no sign any of them has contracted the virus. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
China's Communist Party kicks off its 4th plenum under the leadership of Xi Jinping today, and the buzz phrase is the rule of law. So experts are looking for judicial reforms that will guide Chinese society in the coming years. Our Sun Jung-in has more.
This is the 4th plenum since Chinese President Xi Jinping took office. Elite members of the Chinese Communist Party begin a 4-day policy-setting meeting in Beijing on Monday, seeking to establish a platform for judicial and other reforms. Unlike previous meetings where the items on the agenda centered on issues related to the country's economy, this will be the first time that the party will focus on the rule of law. This is key to realizing Beijing's goal of promoting the modernization of China's governing system and capabilities. It is also expected to institutionalize Xi Jinping's long drive to tackle corruption by introducing a new anti-corruption office. The fate of former National Security Chief Zhou Yongkang, the first member of the party's Politburo Standing Committee to be detained for corruption, will also be a key development to watch during the meeting. There is speculation the leadership will make an example of him to show its determination to implement the rule of law. All eyes are also on what kind of measures the plenum will come up with to deal with the ongoing unrest in Hong Kong.
The protests may be drawn out for a long time and turn more bloody, so the Chinese government needs to figure out some countermeasures.
Other items to be discussed during the plenum include economic reforms such as provincial government's debt and rural land trade regulation. Sun Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
And speaking of the unrest in Hong Kong, pro-democracy protests calling for free elections are showing few signs of losing momentum as demonstrations enter their 23rd day today. Over the weekend, the standoff between police and protesters turned violent in Mongkok after demonstrators retook parts of the district. Now, police used pepper spray and batons to control the crowds. At least 20 people were reported injured, including police officers. A 23-year-old man was also arrested on Saturday following an online post that encouraged others to join in the assembly in Mongkok, according to a police report. Talks between protest leaders and Hong Kong government officials are set to take place on Tuesday. And moving on to the situation on the Syrian-Turkish border, Kurdish forces are reportedly making gains on the strategic city of Kobani as a U.S. assault took down Islamic State militants from the air. Local residents said the airstrikes stopped the jihadists in their tracks, of which U.S. Center Command said there were at least 11 launched on Saturday and Sunday. The UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said some 70 IS fighters were killed over the weekend. It's no longer a rare sight to see a Porsche or a Ferrari pass by in the capital Seoul, as the market for what are called supercars is apparently growing here. ARIRANG's Kim Hyun-bin reports on the reasons behind this boom on this week's Industry Insight.
Three seconds is all it takes for a supercar like this to go from 0 to 100 an hour. But it's taken a bit longer for these marvels of engineering to take Korea's ultra-high-end market by storm.
They're not something you'll see every day, but these so-called supercars, Lamborghinis, McLarens, and Ferraris, are no longer a rare sight on the streets of Seoul, especially in the capital's flashy Gangnam district.
Since super and ultra high-end cars started coming into the Korean market in 1987, more than 1 million have sold here. It took 20 years to sell the first 300,000, but some 600,000 have been sold in the past 7 years. These days, Korean consumers are placing greater emphasis on uniqueness and scarcity when selecting their vehicles.
Their owners are often in the richest 0.1% of Korean society, and it's not hard to see why, as a supercar often costs more than a typical house, running into the millions. So who exactly are buying these cars?
The higher Korean won helps sales, but supercar buyers don't really feel the effects of the sluggish economy. Also, Koreans have a strong taste for luxury goods, and supercars are just a different means of showing off your wealth.
Ultra-high-end auto brands report jumps in sales across the board in Korea. Some talk about a decent 20 to 30% rise, while others, like Maserati, are seeing their sales go through the roof. The Italian automakers sold 280 units in the first half of this year, double what it sold the whole of last year. The increase will be more than triple for all of this year. Brands like Ferrari just can't supply models fast enough to meet demand.
Ferrari owners are not that young. They're generally middle-aged men in their 40s, 50s, and 60s who have strong personalities and enjoy specialized cultural activities. To meet their needs, we host numerous events that match their interests and make the most of sports-related marketing, such as Formula One.
Ferrari and Lamborghini will have to stay on their toes, though, as more rivals enter the Korean market. Britain's Aston Martin, famous for its models that have featured in James Bond movies, recently opened a showroom in Seoul. McLaren, whose models are said to be priced at some $500,000, started to take orders last month. With luxury car makers identifying Korea as a key market for growth, many drivers here will increasingly see their cars bypassed by the likes of Lamborghinis and McLarens. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
In the year 2012 for Korea was at its record high.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul.
Shopping market thinks the true meaning of creation shines through. New data shows 3 of the industries that have kept the Korean economy moving are starting to lose their competitive edge. And this is raising questions about how Korea can change its economic structure to ensure sustainable growth. Our Kim Ji-yeon has this report.
The pillars of the Korean economy includes mobile phones, shipbuilding, and automobiles, but their dominance within the hierarchy appears to be shifting as the rates of increase in sales and operating profits are on a sharp decline. The Federation of Korean Industries, in a survey of 176 local companies, found that the rate of increase in sales among smartphone companies recorded a more than a 9% drop in the first half of this year. That represents a steep decline from the 30% increase recorded last year and a 70% spike seen in 2012. The shipbuilding industry finds itself in a similar position. The sales performance in shipbuilding rose just 0.9% in the first half, down from a 2% increase in sales growth recorded in 2012. Some like Hyundai Heavy Industries and Samsung Heavy Industries even recorded operating losses in the first 6 months of the year. Of the three so-called pillars, the auto sector appears to be faring the best, but sales are starting to sputter. The rate of increase in sales came to 1.5% in the first half of this year, falling from a 10.5% increase in 2012. The Federation of Korean Industries believes it's mainly due to the prolonged period of low growth in the global economy, which in turn has had an effect on the export-driven Korean economy. Also, the industries are being affected by the rising price competitiveness of rival companies in Japan and China that have been buoyed by government-led expansionary policies. In response, Vice Chairman of the Federation of Korean Industries, Lee Seung-chul, has called for more deregulatory moves in the industrial sector to improve conditions for local companies. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
And the weakening Japanese yen is a burden to not only Korean exporters, but also Korean firms doing business in Japan. This is prompting calls on Seoul to intervene in the exchange market and provide financial support. In a recent survey conducted by the Korea International Trade Association on 56 Korean companies operating in Japan, including Samsung and LG, more than 80% said the weak yen was having a negative effect on their business. Now, those in manufacturing and trade also said these were leading to conflicts with clients over unit prices and a drop in orders. The yen, which was trading at 1,171 in March, recently fell to around 955 won. Korea's presidential office of Cheongwade is urging the National Assembly to waste no time in ratifying the country's free trade agreement with Australia. The office says a swift ratification would give Korean exporters a head start over their Japanese rivals. The government is concerned that Korean exporters will lose ground to Japan if Japan's FTA with Australia takes effect first. Korea and Australia signed their FTA in April, and the Korean government submitted it to the National Assembly for approval last month. Australia has been asking Korea to speed up the process as it has already completed the necessary parliamentary procedures. Now, following his two-day trip to Korea last week for talks with Samsung officials, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is sharing what he saw with the rest of the world. A photo posted to his own Facebook page shows Zuckerberg and his management team in suits at Samsung Electronics computer chip plant in Hwaseong in the Gyeonggi-do province. Now, Zuckerberg called the chip-making process inspiring and mentioned that 40% of the world's memory chips are made at that plant. He thanked Samsung for hosting his team and said he looks forward to, quote, working together to connect the world, end quote. Industry watchers say the two tech giants might be working on a plan to produce Facebook smartphones, wearables, and virtual reality devices. It was the closest planetary approach by a comet in human history. Siding Spring is the name of the comet that passed by Mars early Monday morning Korea time, and in doing so may have unlocked some mysteries about the red planet and the origins of our solar system. Connie Kim has this story.
It's being called a once-in-a-million space event. Hurtling at 56 kilometers per second, the mountain-sized Siding Spring comet made its closest encounter to Mars at 3:27 a.m. Monday, Korea time. It traveled as close as 140,000 kilometers to the red planet, or just about one-third the distance between the Earth and Moon. To prevent possible damage to its Mars orbiters, NASA moved them to the other side of the planet.
It takes a half a millimeter sized particle traveling at 56 kilometers per second to injure one of these spacecraft.
But satellites in the area will be studying the comet, including its gas and dust shroud and the material that trails behind it. Using that data, scientists hope to gain a better understanding of Mars, including more about the planet's weather patterns and its atmosphere. And as the icy comet is believed to be the frozen remnants from the formation of the solar system, scientists also hope they'll get a peek 4.5 billion years into the past at the origins of the solar system. It's taken Siding Spring 1 million years to make its way to Mars, truly making this a unique opportunity for science. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
Last week, we learned about an exhibition featuring restored ancient cultural artifacts, and today, our Im Hyun-hee brings us a few more priceless treasures that were recently unveiled. Good afternoon, Hyun-hee.
Good afternoon. You're absolutely right. So sometimes these national treasures or these treasures are found through excavation. Sometimes they're stumbled upon accidentally, but regardless, each one is very precious and immensely special to the future of Korea's culture. And so today I have a look at two more items that were donated to the Academy of Korean Studies. Take a look.
A new Joseon Dynasty weapon has been unveiled to the public for the first time. And although Joseon Hwando swords have been seen before, this particular sword wasn't carried by a soldier, but instead a Confucian scholar known as a sunbi. The sword is the only one of its kind to ever be discovered, and its exquisite craftsmanship places it in the class of priceless cultural artifacts. Even after hundreds of years, the body of the sword is still very much intact, a testament to the quality and handiwork of the piece. Carried around the waist, the sword was used by ancient scholars as a source of protection.
Joseon Dynasty scholarly officials excelled at both studying and the martial arts, so they also carried swords.
A Joseon Dynasty work of calligraphy in the Gwangjoche form has also been revealed, written by the great-grandson of the legendary calligrapher Hwang Gi-do, also known as Lonely Mountain. Also a calligrapher master, his grandson Lee-ha rewrote an ancient times memorial, the work itself an important cultural find.
3,000 characters is an enormous find, and calligraphy is a big part of Korean culture, so this is a huge contribution.
These two priceless artifacts are part of a collection of over 930 works, originally owned by 3 noble families, now donated to the people, to be preserved for the years to come.
So calligraphy is an art in itself, and during the
right.
Joseon Dynasty, there were people designated to that area alone.
Right, so these individuals were called myungpis, and they were known for their calligraphy. It was not just their work, but it was really a form of art for them. So calligraphy is sometimes called the soul of words, and so it really is a special, valuable type of writing, and people really put calligraphers, great masters of calligraphy, in high esteem because of that.
So I'm assuming that these pieces are national treasures, or are they in the works of becoming national treasures?
Not quite yet, because they're still pretty new. So there's a process to declare something as a national treasure, and so they will have to go through that process. But the Academy of Korean Studies, they did declare that these are worth or valuable enough to be considered national treasures. So we'll have to keep an eye on that.
Right, and we really need to extend our gratitude to the people who donated the art pieces. And do they give out information? I'm assuming not.
So
right?
that was
About
a little
who
bit right. So they're not exactly sure. Well, the name wasn't given out, but it was said that it was handed from a family. That the family did hand this down through the generations, and that's why it was so well preserved, and we're very fortunate to get in this condition. So now that it's donated to us, it'll be preserved for the generations to come.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Uni, for today's report.
You're very welcome.
It's a rainy Monday here in Korea. I'm Michelle Park to give you updates on the weather. Now, we have nationwide rain in the forecast all day today, except on Jeju Island, where it's looking very cloudy at the moment. And due to the rain, the temperatures won't be getting as high as yesterday. And currently, the rain has stopped in the central region, but it'll be on and off throughout the whole day. This rain is expected to last until Wednesday all across the nation. Further, but a heavy amount is expected over in Chungcheon-do and Gyeongsang-do provinces. Now, those regions will get up to 120 millimeters, while areas further down south can expect a bit less, between 40 to 100, while Seoul will get between up to 40 millimeters. Now, going over to our temperature readings for today, Seoul will peak at 18 this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will reach up to 21 and 22 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju Island gets up to 24, while Dokdo is at 18, while Mount Kumgang hits just less at 17 degrees. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and have a wonderful day.
And that brings us to the end of our newscast. Our next newscast is at 4 p.m. Korea time. I'll see you then.